What's going on, MJ traders and investors? It's Rod with the Pow Group. Welcome back on the Pursuit of Wealth, your home for MJ stocks, crypto assets, news, and interviews. Also home to the best MJ community. It is Saturday, March 9th. Hope you're having a great weekend. In this video, we're going to do another rapid fire news update for the period March 2nd to March 8th. If you're not familiar with this new format, essentially we go over all of the pertinent information that transpired over the last week or so. And it's not to go into deep dive details. It's just go over to high level overview so that in case you missed it, you can look into it a little bit more on your own time. But before we get to it, make sure to smash the like. It helps support me in the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. If you're new, you can subscribe, tick the bell, all that good stuff, and you'll be notified on any future videos or when I go live. Also, as always, this is not financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. And you should never, ever buy or sell anything based on anything that I say or write. Also, you can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter. The handle for that is @GroupPow. I've been hanging out there a lot lately, so you can come chill, and that's basically my platform of choice going forward when it comes to social media. Jumping right into it, Thailand health official says new recreational pot ban will go into effect this year, so kind of backpedaling on what they had previously stated. A law that walks back cannabis reform in Thailand is expected to be approved by the end of the year, according to the country's health minister. But as we know, Thailand is one of the most traditional areas of the world, and the fact they're even considering it is a great thing. So I don't think this should be, anything to worry about. I think it's a great sign of the times and where we're really going at a global level. Also, MJ Biz Daily reports that Canada's unpaid MJ taxes soar 72% to almost $300 million. So if this doesn't encourage the federal government to do something, I don't know what will. And as we know, there's been tons of bankruptcies, insolvencies. A lot of people attribute this to, the companies in Canada, they just can't make any money. It's the company's fault, or it's the market's fault. Canada just doesn't have the population to sustain it or to be profitable. I think that's a bunch of bull. I think we know that excise taxes, if you look at Organigram's recent comments on their recent earnings, they said about a third of their earnings went to excise tax. So, these are growing pains. These are things that we're going to see in any nascent industry, especially when it's a controlled substance in the U.S., right? It's still on Schedule 1 in the U.S. There's still certain areas of the world that it's the death penalty if you even get caught with simple possession. So there's a lot to be, determined here. And, the fact that Canada is over 5 years legal at the federal level and we still haven't really caught up with the industry is a bit of a farce. It's almost laughable at this point. But there's so much growth here just in Canada. If you look at Ontario, the store cap doubling from 75 to 150, and then Germany coming online as well. So a lot of the Canadian companies have a pretty big head start with regards to international. So I think it's just growing pains. We still can't even do traditional advertising here in Canada. So there's so much growth here. It's not even funny. Once we introduce, beverages and different categories into, events and concerts and restaurants, that type of thing, there's so much growth. It's really hard to fathom. Also, MJ Biz Daily reports that cannabis producer Cronos narrows 2023 loss to $74.5 million. And we know they're sitting on a boatload of cash, almost $1 billion in cash. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Cronos. We know they have a lot of backing from Altria, which is the big tobacco giant. So we'll see if they continue to up their stake in this LP. Also, MJ legalization linked to decline in beer sales, indicating substitution effect, Canadian study finds. And let me know in the comments section below if you're one of these, if you're one of these people that looks to other alternatives. We know that alcohol is poison and MJ is medicine. And obviously, when it goes to picking one or the other, we're always going to pick MJ as a healthier alternative, right? Not only that, it's recreational. It has medical benefits, but it also has that recreational, kind of side to it, right? So when we look at alcohol, what is alcohol? Are we drinking alcohol? Like back in the day, alcohol used to be used for anesthetic, right? It used to be kind of some medical benefit to it. But as of right now, like in 2024, like most people aren't consuming alcohol for any kind of medicinal purpose, right? It's purely recreational. So the fact that MJ actually has medicinal benefit to it, and then also that recreational side to it as well, it's a no-brainer, right? And as we know like people like companies like SNDL, who's big into retail for MJ and alcohol. We know Tilray is big into retail, well, not retail, but they're big into MJ and actual beer brands, and they're trying to make beer cool again, and they're focusing on the craft section, which I think is an absolutely brilliant idea because they're going to be able to infuse those brands with MJ eventually. They'll be able to do MJ infused beverages. Think your Sweetwater 420 brand, right? The pale ale there. So there's so many opportunities here. It's not even funny. Obviously, there's going to be room for both of these going forward with regards to a recreational standpoint. But as we know, alcohol is poison and MJ is medicine. So MJ shouldn't even be in the same category as alcohol, in my opinion. Also, a federal agency says there's little research supporting that MJ driving impairment tests based on THC concentration. So this has been something that's been very interesting to me because you're going to have people that are buying products from companies with the sole purpose of being normal, right? Like there's some people who have Tourette syndrome, or they have epilepsy, or they're having chronic seizures. How are we going to really differentiate this? I mean, obviously, if you have a medical card, you can be exempt from certain tests and laws, that type of thing. But are we really going to get to the point where we can do like roadside tests? That's going to be really interesting on how that plays out. That's always been a point of contention for me is, how are we really going to like solidify that? How are we going to find, and maybe with AI or something like that, maybe with the amount that technology is improving, that we'll find some way to, distinguish or to measure exactly how intoxicated people are on the plant. But it's going to be an interesting point of contention, like I said, because people aren't drinking alcohol to deal with epilepsy or stuff like that, right? So it's definitely interesting. So it's going to be kind of fun to follow that story as it rolls out. Also, High Tide opens second Canna Cabana in Mississauga, Ontario, as we look for store opening doubling. So essentially, as you've been aware in my previous videos, in my prior videos, I mentioned that Ontario is going to be doubling the store count from 75 to 150. So, players like High Tide will be able to increase their store count from 75 to 150. So they got a lot of room to grow just in Ontario, in their own backyard here in Canada, before we look to the second pillar in Germany, potentially in 2025, and then US reform potentially in 2025 and beyond as well. So in their mind, I think they probably are okay with a slow rollout across other markets, right? Also, Aurora introduces medical MJ pasty for patient relief in Australia. I think that's how you pronounce it. But obviously, I just wanted to bring this up to really hit home that Aurora is definitely focusing on the medical standpoint, which I think is very smart because everybody was trying to be everything to everybody at the beginning. And we know that that's not sustainable. We don't need 1,000 LPs or 1,000 MSOs, right? We need companies that are going to really differentiate themselves and create a competitive advantage and have this moat that's really going to, make them a master of their craft. And if they focus on everything, they're going to be a master of nothing. Those who focus on everything are a master of nothing, essentially, right? So as long as you have your core focus, and then a lot of these companies are going to be very, very, very beneficial to each other, right? They're going to lift each other up and all boats rise together. So Canada's Broken Coast MJ brand expands renowned craft flower lineup as well. So this is a brand of Tilray brands. And you can see here they have cherry cheesecake coming out and Emergency. So this is going to be interesting. It's definitely a premier, like it's definitely pretty expensive with regards to, buying, an eighth or a quarter. But this is definitely one of the most recognized brands in Canada. And I think Tilray is going to be an absolute powerhouse. They've got so many things going for them, and I think a lot more products to come that we can be on the lookout for. So I'll keep everybody up to date with regards to that. Also, MJ Biz Daily reports that New Mexico's combined MJ sales surpass 1 billion. This isn't the first time we've heard this, right? There's tons of markets. It's projected that Florida could be at 2-3 billion, maybe even 4 or 6 billion in the next few years, especially if they approve adult use. And that could potentially be enacted in 2025. So there's lots to be excited about here. It's not even funny. Is Mitch McConnell stepping down for good for MJ reform? It depends who replaces him. So as we mentioned in previous videos as well, Mitch McConnell, who's a longtime natural medicine and medicine of the future hater, is going to be stepping down as a GOP Senate leader. He's going to be in the Senate still, but he's going to be stepping down as the leader. So potentially paves the way for more progressive. Are we going to see people who are more conservative? Are we going to see people who are more an even bigger hater? It's hard to imagine that someone is going to come in and absolutely tear it a new one. I really don't think that anybody who comes in and replaces him is going to have a worse stance on MJ than he would have. So at the end of the day, this is great. Out with the old, in with the new. Also, Leafly to announce fourth quarter and fiscal year 2023 financial results on March 8th, 2024, as earnings season continues to roll in, and MJ MSO Planet 13 Price's public offering to raise $11.3 million. So stock got hit on that news, as well as we had some dilution there. Also, Trulieve to open Express Medical MJ dispensary in Palm Bay, Florida, as they continue their market rollout and domination in Florida as we look to potential adult use sales. Obviously, going to be a massive player. We also have like AYR, Cureleaf, Verano, some other names, but personally not a name that I hold directly. I own it indirectly through MSOS, and I'm pretty comfortable with the amount of exposure that I have through that ETF. But not downplaying the fact that the company could be, well positioned, and if not the best positioned for that rollout of Florida. Also, Hawaiian Senate overwhelmingly approves adult use MJ legalization bill. Could Hawaii become the next state in the country to legalize recreational MJ? So this is just writing on the wall. Again, like you see each and every month, each and every day, each and every year, we continue to see an overwhelming amount of adoption and just acceptance of this medicine of the future. And it's only the tip of the iceberg, in my opinion. And like I said, Germany becoming the first in Europe, only expectation is that others will follow, and there's never been a better time to be buying the dip, and especially when we're down 80-90% plus on some names in the MJ space. Also, Manitoba Harvest, which is another brand from Tilray Brands, their hemp food division introduces protein-rich breakfast staples with new Superseed instant oatmeal. So again, they've got their hands in so many different things. They're definitely prepared for US reform and international reform, and they're the number one here in Canada. There's a reason why all of these companies in Canada are getting lots of institutional capital and Fortune 500 attention, from Altria, Constellation Brands, British American Tobacco. They know that these companies there's going to be winners and losers both sides of the border. And there's a lot of trouble ahead for the MSOs once they start to expand to the rest of the US. Imagine if the US came out tomorrow or next week or in a few months or even in a year or so, and they said, you know what, we're going full-blown legalization in the US at the federal level. These companies in the US would have to drastically improve CapEx spending, and they barely even have a few states on their belt, right? Like there's companies in the US, MSOs, that are leaving certain states in the US because they're focusing on key important markets. So if they're leaving other states, that just means that the companies that are built for expansion, they're built for scale, there's a lot of opportunity. And if you look at the MSOs versus Canada, there's way more opportunity for the LPs into the US if federally permissible. And once exports and things like that start to become a thing, which I think is ultimately where we'll be going, and where we end up, treating like alcohol and tobacco. But there's so much more upside for the Canadian companies than the US companies looking alternatively speaking, right? Like look at the US expanding to Canada. Who cares? Look at the US expanding to Europe. Okay, that can be argued, but at the end of the day, Canada has a huge start on international, and obviously they're dominating the Canadian market, and they've operated for over 5 years at a kind of a legal level, right? So they have that experience under their belt. They have the trials and tribulations. They have the investor capital. They have the Fortune 500 capital. It's going to be interesting. A lot of LPs will become MSOs and vice versa. So we need to expect winners and losers both sides of the border and even internationally, and then plan accordingly in our portfolios. Also, Cureleaf grows 2023 revenue to $1.35 billion and looks to new MJ markets. So I've done a video on this as well. I won't dive into the deep dive details on that one. You can check out that video if you want to learn more. Also, MJ MSO Maramed reports revenue growth of $148.6 million, but they still had a net loss in 2023. This isn't a name that I've been really sold on. I mean, Betty's Eddies, I think that's what they're called. Obviously one of the biggest brands in the US, but I haven't tried them. If you tried them, let me know. But at the end of the day, just having the best edibles isn't going to really cut it. Anybody can come out with any kind of edible, and there's going to be eventual partnerships with, Fortune 200, Fortune 500 companies. Think whether it's Mandela's or whether it's, who knows what it's going to be, Kellogg's. There's going to be edibles that are, out of this world eventually. So just having the best edible is not the end of the world, in my opinion. And, they got a lot of competition in the US. So it's going to be interesting to see who the winners and losers. We have a pretty good idea here in Canada who the winners and losers are going to be. And it's already dwindling, right? Like there's not that many big tier one companies now like there used to be. And eventually that'll be a point of confusion and uncertainty for the U.S. market. We just don't know at this point, right? There's just not enough data, and we don't need the amount of MSOs. There's so many MSOs in the U.S. that are doing the same thing that look very similar, and there's just no place for all of them, unfortunately. But there's definitely winners and losers going to be, going to be had both sides of the borders. Also, Schumer continues to promise and underdeliver. He touts that very productive MJ banking talks with House and top sponsors, says bill has momentum to pass this year. So we'll see whether or not it happens before the elections, after the elections. At the end of the day, I've always thought that safe banking would more than likely get passed before any meaningful reform, because we need we don't need, as retail investors, that's the last thing. We want to front run them. But unfortunately, that's not the way the world works, unless you're in crypto. Crypto has been the biggest front runner because, every mom and pop or every average Joe and Jane can buy Bitcoin or buy whatever crypto. And it's usually before the big institutional capital can flow in. But with MJ, it's not necessarily the case, because a lot of these brokers are restricting access to buying them. You can't buy OTC, or you can't buy on the Canadian exchanges, or even, MSOS is being restricted on certain brokers. So there's so much manipulation and just, censoring and things like that are going on that, it doesn't really open the floodgates. So I've always said that Wall Street's going to be positioned first. Your JP Morgans, your Goldman Sachs, your Morgan Stanleys. Nothing happens in the world without them, and they'll want to get positioned first before any meaningful reform. And speaking of reform, Biden promotes MJ reform in the State of the Union address, a historic first. This is the first time a president has ever done that. And again, the fact that we're not necessarily getting the most movement that we would like to see with regards to reform, the fact that it keeps coming up, the fact that bills and whatnot keep getting touted in Congress, it's a topic of concentration right now, and it's just a matter of time. It's not if, but when. And as of right now, we've never seen more momentum and chatter going on in Capitol Hill or in Congress or, in the presidential executive branch, right? So this is all great news in my opinion. Not so great news, MedMen shutters all but 2 of its California MJ operations. So again, MedMen is on the outs. I've talked about this before. In my opinion, it's not investable. If you want to put a YOLO position, $500 to $1,000, say, if your net worth is $10 million and you want to put $100,000 into this thing, I still question that. But if your net worth is less than $1 million, I wouldn't put any more than $1,000 into this thing. So you have to remember that companies, there's a lot of companies in the US, there's a lot of companies in Canada still, there's going to be lots of consolidation. Is it worthy of your investment dollars? And MedMen, in my opinion, is not. It could be a company that turns around, maybe, who knows, but I wouldn't invest any more than like 1% of my entire net worth into this thing. But they could be a nice, and we know Tilray has their convertible debt, so it could be an opportunity for them to buy them pennies on the dollar. And if we get any kind of meaningful federal reform, and if it's ever permitted federally, then that could be a nice opportunity for them to scoop them up on the cheap. But we'll see. Again, YOLO position for me. The DEA can also save the withering industry of MJ. Will it? President Biden raised a review of law in State of the Union speech, and tax payments could drop, reviving growth if if the DEA relaxes stance. So right now, everything's on the DEA. We know we're waiting for some sort of decision after HHS recommended Schedule 3. I think the most likely scenario is we get some sort of decision from the DEA between timeframe wise, I think between now and the end of April. And I think the most likely scenario is we get Schedule 3 recommendation approval. Whether or not it happens in June, July, August, that remains that's up in air. It's anybody's guess. But I think the most likely timeframes between now and the end of April. So be it. If it's between now and August, that's fine. I can wait. I've waited 3 years in this brutal bear market. I can wait 3-4 more months. I can wait multiple years at this point if I have to, because I know that MJ is only ever going to be accepted and legalized at the global level once, and this is truly a generational opportunity that we can pass down to our families and our families' families. So going to end it there, it's Rod with Power Group. Thanks again for joining us on the Pursuit of Wealth. Smash a like if you think I earned it today. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this news in the comments section. We'll continue the conversation there. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you again on the next video.